Throughout the history of weapons design, there have been some weapons that were excellent and many that were just okay. But the worst weapons were more of a danger to the people using them than to the enemy. Here is a weapon that scares the enemy. Number 1. The Panzer 68.
Built in Switzerland in the 1960s, the Panzer 68 was a domestic Swiss tank designed to give Switzerland a modern tank that could stand up to the latest Soviet armored vehicles. Nearly 400 of the tanks were delivered. They were used until 2003. In theory, the Panzer 68 was a formidable design with a new computerized fire control system that allowed accurate gunfire and good maneuverability. In practice, however, there were some hilarious problems. In 1979, a well-regarded Swiss magazine published an expose which revealed that the tank had over 50 flaws. Some of these issues were mundane. For example, the NBC protection system didn't work properly. But other problems were more serious. For example, the tank couldn't be shifted into reverse unless it stopped moving forward first. Also, the tank turret randomly twitched from side to side when the tank radio was turned on because the radio frequency interfered with the tank's electric control system. Of course, this ruined the aim of the tank. Finally, the tank gun would automatically fire if the heating was turned on. Supposedly, these issues were eventually fixed. But the tank's reputation had been ruined, and it was withdrawn from frontline service until a foreign replacement was found for it. Number 2. The M22 Locust tank. It was a brilliant idea, a light tank that could be delivered by glider onto the battlefield, giving paratroopers and glider infantry more firepower than they could otherwise have. The result was the M22 Locust, a tank that weighed 8 metric tons. It was 1.8 meters, 6 feet, tall and 2.1 meters, 7 feet, wide. The US produced over 100 of these tanks, which were armed with 37mm guns. However, America never used them. Many ended up with the British, and several saw combat during the Allied crossing of the Rhine River into Germany. The tanks proved to be terrible weapons on the battlefield. One of them fell through the floor of its glider while the glider was flying, and another one flipped over after landing. Even the tanks that worked after landing made things worse for their accompanying infantry. The tanks attracted a disproportionate amount of weapons fire, which injured or killed many of the infantrymen around them. The tanks were so vulnerable on the battlefield that even infantry rifles could damage them in places, and the 37mm gun was useless against enemy tanks. As a result, these tanks were soon withdrawn from combat. Number 3. The Sticky Bomb. In the late 1930s, a major in the British Army teamed up with 2 Cambridge professors to develop an anti-tank grenade. It could be thrown at the side of a tank where the grenade was then supposed to stick, ensuring an effective attack. Initial testing proved extremely disappointing when the mock grenades refused to stick to anything. Then World War II broke out, and the British were desperate for any anti-tank weapon to stop German panzers. So the concept was revived. The new design consisted of a flexible outer case, which was made of wool with a sticky substance on it, over an inner capsule of glass. The glass was supposed to make the grenade rigid enough to throw but allow it to break when it smashed against the side of a tank. In that way, the sticky, flexible outer layer would adhere to the outside of the targeted tank. That was the theory. In practice, the new sticky bomb stuck to anything and everything when users were attempting to throw it, including the user's own military uniform. Number 4. The Bat Bomb. Project X-Ray was a plan to weaponize bats to burn down Japanese cities. The concept was dreamed up by a dentist who had been inspired by a vacation in bat-filled Mexico. The bats, strapped with incendiary devices, would be released over Japanese cities, roost in their flammable wooden homes, and burn these cities to the ground. Compared to firebombing, the use of bat bombs was considered to be a more surgical and less indiscriminate method of destroying Japanese infrastructure. In March 1943, the U.S. government authorized further investigation into this bizarre concept. A variety of challenges needed to be solved, including how to store the bats during transport and how to engineer and distribute the incendiary devices. Testing proved that the concept worked. The results were confirmed when armed bats were accidentally released during an attempt to photograph bat movement. 15 minutes later, the bat bombs exploded, burning down almost the entire Air Force Base where the tests were conducted. A general's car was also destroyed by flames. Project X-Ray was cancelled after the U.S. military decided that the concept would not be ready to deploy until after the war was over. Number 5. The K-19 submarine. The K-19 was the Soviets' first nuclear-powered, ballistic missile submarine. It was supposed to give the Soviets a more survivable submarine for retaliation against the Americans. However, the vessel seemed to be cursed from the beginning. During construction, several workers suffered final destination-esque deaths. An electrician was crushed by a falling component, and an engineer fell to his death between two of the submarine's missile tubes. On its first mission, the submarine came perilously close to a meltdown of one of its nuclear reactors. If the reactor had melted down, it would have killed everyone on board. So the captain recruited 22 volunteers from his 136-person crew to go into the overheating reactor and to re-rig a new cooling system. All 22 volunteers died horribly from radiation poisoning. In several hours, they went from perfectly healthy to bloated, bleeding, and balding. Death followed quickly. The submarine was decommissioned a mere 10 years later in 1972 after a fire killed 28 sailors on board. That's some list of deadly weapons according to our version. Thanks to watching this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to your friends.